One of the things I wanted to talk about early on is an idea that I think weaves its way through a lot of the stuff that I'm concerned with. And it's an idea that a lot of people would probably instinctually consider to be quite obvious, but I wonder if it is obvious as we think. It's the idea of being thoughtful. And I sort of mean being thoughtful in a macro sense, in a life sense, but also specifically being thoughtful as artists in the decisions we make, both in a creative sense, in a business sense, in terms of our careers, and existing within the moments we're in, embracing where we're at, and making decisions with an awareness of why we're doing so and the purpose we have in making those decisions. Anybody who's worked with me knows that I tend to work fairly quickly. I sort of make a decision about what I want, and I figure out what I think is going to get me there. And if that's not working, I'll abandon that and move to something else. But most people would say that I don't spend a lot of unnecessary time on things. And anybody who knows me intimately also knows that I love improvised music. And I love avant-garde music that sort of exists within a moment and it can change at any given time. I thrive on that sort of interaction. And I think the impression that some people would have is that that is kind of approached with a reckless abandon and that there isn't very much thoughtfulness in that process. But I think it's actually quite the opposite. If you think about some of the great master improvisers in music, they've developed such a deep and dense language internally that they can reference at any time that in sort of abandoning norms and abandoning tradition in any way, shape, or form, they still have internal reference points that they can get to very quickly to exist within the moment, and they can be thoughtful about those processes and those decisions at any given time. And I think it's perfectly relevant in a recording sense. And I'll give you an example. There's most often I'm mixing records that I didn't work on from the beginning. So if I get asked to mix a record, somebody else has tracked it and I'm getting the files somewhere down the line. Almost invariably, I would say 99% of the time, when I open up the sessions, there's probably 10 to 20 tracks that were recorded that are muted or turned down entirely. And specifically with drums, there's almost always 12 or 14 drum tracks plus another 6 to 8 tracks that are just muted or turned down entirely. And without exception, it's almost always the trash mic, some sort of room mic, and maybe a second overhead or some other crazy mic that was put in some crazy position. And it indicates to me that the fact that they're muted and turned down tells me that nobody's listened to those tracks in months, that nobody's probably ever really listened to them. And then when I unmute them, say for instance, if I unmute the trash mic, it's clear that it was placed with virtually no regard for where it was. It was just splatted with distortion and compression, and it bears no relationship whatsoever to the music in the track and to the other drum sounds. And it leads me to wonder what decision was being made and why it was being made. It used to be that something like a trash mic was a purposeful choice that engineers would use to add color to a drum kit, to do something interesting with it, to shine a different light on it, color it differently. And now it almost seems like it's a matter of course. We need to put a trash mic up, and we need to put a lo-fi mic, a shitty mic, just throw a bunch of distortion on it and compression on it, and maybe somewhere down the line it's useful. And that's about the extent of the thoughtfulness put into it. And it doesn't just happen with that, it happens with guitars. I'll get a guitar track where it's like 3 close mics on an amp and a hallway mic. And the hallway mic is so noisy from, say, fluorescent lights in the hallway or people opening the door that it's completely unusable. And you just wonder, did somebody actually think about doing that? And why did they think about doing that? And I wouldn't say it's a hobby horse of mine, but it's something that just sort of bothers me because creative energy is not unlimited. And at some point in that process, somebody needs to take creative energy and put it toward that decision that somebody else made at another point in time in a really unthoughtful manner. And I find that obviously to be a bummer. There are times when that sort of recklessness can lead somewhere magical, for sure. But in the instances where a track just lives in a session for years, or for months even, and is turned down and nobody's ever listened to it, I just often wonder what are the reasons that somebody chose to do that. Another example that is probably quite obvious to most of us, and all of us do it, without exception, all of us do it, is being on our phones. There's nothing more depressing to me than spending 15 or 20 minutes on something that I think is really interesting, and then I turn around and everybody's on their phones, just completely detached from the moment, completely removed from the purpose of being here in the room together collaborating. And again, we all do it. I'm certainly not scolding anybody for doing it. But there's a general lack of thoughtfulness in being on your phone in that environment. If you need to be on it, you should be out of the room. And when you're in the room with other people collaborating, you should be in the moment and aware of the moment and functionally concerned with your thoughtfulness in the moment towards others. There's nothing worse than being in the room doing an overdub and then the track stops and you're just kind of waiting. And the reason you're waiting is because everybody's on their phone almost all the time now. And, you know, it's a deeply depressing thing. And I would love to see us take more active steps toward not being on our phones while we're in the room working together, because it's just wasted creative energy, energy that we could be putting towards the thing that we're trying to make. I think it's just such a subtle but crucial thing. And it's sort of gotten in the way of people having an intimate relationship with each other in the studio that transcends the things that we normally think and talk about, a kind of inherent understanding of where each other is in the process. And that's the most important part of making a record. It's not actually the music you come away with. It's the understandings between people that are working and engaged on the project at the same time. That stuff's valuable. And the more we put a barrier in between us and another person and that collaboration, the more damage we're doing to the most valuable relationship we have at that moment. This isn't to say that we should belabor decisions or overthink decisions. In fact, I think overthinking something is not being thoughtful. It's overthinking it. It's a different phenomenon altogether. I think being just momentarily aware of any decision that we're making at any given point, whether it's our career, our business decisions, our songwriting decisions, a guitar part. Don't just throw a piano part on a song because you think it should be there. Why are you doing it? Don't just put compression on a lead vocal because you think it should be there. Why are you doing it? You know, it's that simple question. Why am I doing this? Right now, why am I doing this, and what am I trying to get out of this decision? I think can really help us cultivate a sense of purposeful creative expression that is deeply, deeply, deeply important in what we do. It's the sort of thing that I think we all want to believe that we're thinking about all the time, and we think about it so much less than we think we do. Well, that's basically what I wanted to say today. The other thing I want to mention is if you have questions for me at any point, please send them along. Send me a direct message, and I may do a thing where I'll bring up somebody's question and I'll answer it on one of these things. Who knows? But as always, thanks for being here and indulging, and I'll be back at some other point. Cheers.